Amboselli's western edge, mid-afternoon. The road ran dry and pale through the open stretch of scrubland, wind pushing fine sand across its edges like shifting silk. A thin layer of dust coated everything, from scattered thornbrush to the cracked canvas of the vehicle's tires. There was no sound beyond the wind until the brakes caught. The elephant came from the east, limping, slow, and alone. He walked directly into the path of the approaching vehicle, not startled, not hesitant. His head hung low, trunk brushing against his own feet with each unsteady step. There was no herd behind him. Jalen, the volunteer driving the conservation supply truck, cut the engine before the animal reached him. He didn't move. The elephant was thin, badly. His skin clung to the ribcage like fabric over bent wire, and the dust gave him a ghost-like pallor. As the elephant neared the edge of the track, his back leg buckled. Then he dropped. First the front knees folded, then the entire body gave beneath its own weight. A deep thud sank into the earth as the elephant collapsed into the roadside dust, sending up a small cloud. He did not roar. He did not cry. Just a low exhale, like something had finally released. Jalen stepped out slowly, hands down, careful not to approach. The elephant did not move again. Flies circled the exposed skin around his eyes and ears. His one visible tusk, the left, was shorter than it should have been. The other side was bare. There was no collar, no visible tag, no herd call in the distance. At this distance, even without training, Jalen could see the shape of starvation. The joints jutted. The stomach sank. The skin bore the marks of sun cracks and travel, not recent grazing. A soft clicking came from the elephant's throat. Not a threat, not a call, just an involuntary sound. It faded just as quickly. Jalen turned back to the truck, pulling the radio off its clip. "Unknown male," he said quietly. "Collapsed, breathing. No herd. Maybe injured. Definitely alone." The reply came back with static. The closest ranger post was 45 minutes out. He walked no closer, but circled slowly to check the eyes. They remained open, but dull, not following movement, not focused. Every few breaths, the chest rose just enough to confirm life. "If he runs, he dies," Jalen whispered, not as instruction but truth. If the elephant tried to rise now, on this leg, in this state, it would break him. The wind began to shift, carrying the scent of soil and sun-baked bark. Small birds chirped from the scrub, unconcerned. The elephant didn't flinch. Jalen retrieved a water canister but didn't use it. Pouring near the trunk could spook him. Touch could kill the trust. All he could do was wait. For the rangers, for movement, for any sign the elephant had not chosen this place to end. Somewhere behind the breeze, a low note drifted across the land, a far-off rumble. Not from the collapsed body, but deeper, distant. It wasn't clear if it came from thunder or something alive. Jalen stayed kneeling beside the road, the sun pulling long shadows from the dry bushes. Still no sign of another elephant. Still no sign he had come from anywhere at all. The radio crackled twice and fell quiet again. No update yet from the ranger team. The heat was rising, pulling sweat down the side of Jalen's neck as he crouched behind the still elephant. Dust settled gently on the folds of skin. The animal hadn't moved in nearly 10 minutes. Jalen adjusted his position, keeping his body angled sideways, non-threatening, quiet, steady. From this angle, more details emerged. The tusk he'd first seen was blunt, worn down, shorter than it should have been for the size of the animal. The opposite side showed no sign of a break, no root, no damage, just an old scar where the tusk should have grown. It hadn't snapped off recently. It had likely been cut. He scanned the neck for the standard satellite collar. Nothing. No tag in the ear either. In a protected zone like this, that was unusual. Every elephant in this range had been tracked for years, especially the younger ones, especially any survivors. The elephant's skin twitched along the shoulder like brushing off a thought, but it wasn't thought. It was flies. Dozens of them. Jalen watched a patch of them rise and resettle over the same open wound, a long graze below the shoulder blade, scabbed with dirt. He stepped a meter closer, still outside the animal's reach, still no movement. This wasn't an old bull. The closer he looked, the clearer it became. The ears were full-sized but clean, the feet had no cracked overgrowth, and despite the hollowness of the body there was still stretch in the skin near the haunch, the kind of elasticity only found in the young. Not an elder, not an established bull, not yet full grown. Whoever he wasn't supposed to be here. Not alone, not untagged, not this young. The elephant's eye blinked slowly once, then stopped again. Not fully unconscious, but fading. Jalen reached for the canteen again, but kept it capped. Pouring would waste it. The elephant hadn't shifted his trunk since falling. If he didn't move soon, dehydration would finish what exhaustion had started. The radio clicked again. This time, a voice. Still en route? ETA 25. Jalen responded quickly, This elephant is young. No tag, no herd, left tusk missing, breathing slowing. There was silence on the other end, then, Copy that. Could be a poaching survivor. He looked again at the missing tusk. The scar was old, healed, faded into the skin, but it was clear enough. Someone had taken it. Not last week, maybe not even this year, but long enough ago that the memory lived in the body. Jalen's voice was lower now. It's okay. Just stay down. The elephant did not respond, but his tail twitched once. Barely a sign, but it was movement. The stakes were simple. If the elephant moved before help arrived, the fall might break something deeper. If he didn't move at all, his organs might begin to shut down in the sun. A pair of doves landed nearby, pecking at the shade near his side. The elephant didn't flinch. His stillness was not calm. It was the stillness of systems slowing. Jalen remained crouched, waiting. The wind lifted dust in small spirals along the roadside, rising and falling like breath. Somewhere in the distance there was a new sound. Sharp, faint, but not natural. A tap, or a shift, or maybe even a breath. Jalen turned his head toward the sound. The elephant's ribs moved again. Not shallow this time. A fuller breath. Then another. Something was beginning to stir. The wind changed direction just before the sound of another engine broke the horizon. A small current moved across the dirt, brushing a light veil of dust off the elephant's shoulder. It revealed the skin underneath. Shallow ridges, sun-creased folds, and a slow rise and fall beneath the ribs. Not gone. Not yet. Jalen lowered the radio after confirming the coordinates again. The ranger outpost had acknowledged, but they were still 20 minutes out. The heat had thickened. The shade had shortened. Each minute stretched. The elephant's body lay slack, but not entirely limp. The trunk twitched slightly along the ground. The movement wasn't searching, just reflex, the kind of shift that came from nerves still firing somewhere under the weight of exhaustion. His mouth opened once, barely. A thin strand of moisture traced along the tongue, then vanished into dust. Jalen stayed in position, just outside the reach of the tusk. The air was hot enough now that his skin burned even in stillness. But he didn't move. If he approached without cause, the elephant could startle. If he startled, he might rise. And if he rose, if he used that back leg in its current state, it would collapse beneath him. If he moved, he might die. If he didn't, he still might not make it. The stakes hadn't changed. They had only grown more visible. A few meters off, a line of ants curved around the collapsed form, disappearing into the brush. The birds had grown quiet again. Even the insects moved more slowly in the heat. Only the occasional wingbeat disturbed the silence. Jalen reached once more for the water, uncapping the lid just enough to wet his fingers. He didn't touch the elephant, just flicked a few drops near the edge of the trunk, letting the moisture darken the dust. The elephant did not react. He whispered, "Almost there." Nothing moved but the air. Then, from somewhere behind the left haunch, a sound, softer than a cry, sharper than breath. It lasted less than a second. Jalen froze. His eyes traced the line of the elephant's body again. It hadn't come from the mouth. The elephant's eye was closed now, but not sealed. A slight flutter beneath the lid suggested flickering consciousness. He was not unconscious. He was holding on, in the most fragile state between stillness and collapse. Another gust of wind caught a patch of dry grass near the hip. Beneath it, something shifted again. Not from the elephant's leg. Lower. Jalen narrowed his gaze. There was an indentation in the dust below the belly. Not visible before. A depression in the earth where the body sagged slightly, the skin almost cradling something. He took one small step to the side, then paused. A darker shape moved within the shadows under the elephant's stomach. Not another leg, not a branch. It pressed against the ground, then slipped back again. A second breath. Shallow, but separate. He said nothing this time. He crouched lower, waited. The movement came again, Subtle but undeniable. There was something underneath. He keyed the radio. "Update," he said. "He's breathing. Weak but responsive, and there's something under him." Movement beneath the belly. A pause, then, "Copy. Hold position. We're closing in." He placed the radio down quietly beside him, eyes still fixed on the space beneath the elephant's side. The dust curled gently along the outer edge. Each breeze made the shadow shift, revealing the faintest outline of something tucked in the hollow, curled, motionless, but not gone. If the elephant rose, it might crush whatever was underneath. If he didn't move soon, both might be lost to heat. Jalen didn't know what lay beneath. Not fully. Not yet. But he knew now. This wasn't just about saving one elephant. There were 2 lives here. And the window was closing. The air stilled again, thick with sun. A fly buzzed once, then disappeared. The breeze stopped. All that remained was the breath, soft, slow, and nearly silent. But still there. The ranger vehicle arrived with the soft rumble of low gears, slowing to a stop several meters away. Dust rolled out beneath the tires and drifted through the air, settling into the silence that had wrapped itself around the scene. Jalen didn't stand. He only lifted one hand slightly and pointed toward the body. Seifu, the lead ranger, stepped out first. Mid-40s, quiet by nature, he moved with practiced calm. No sudden steps, no loud commands. He nodded once to Jalen, then approached the elephant's head with slow precision, watching for breath, listening for signs. Jalen gestured toward the side. "He's been breathing slow." "I thought he was alone, but there's movement underneath. Something small?" Seifu knelt. His eyes scanned the ears, the temples, the edge of the mouth. Then he leaned slightly closer. The elephant's mouth was parted just enough to show the pink line of the tongue. But something wasn't right. The lips twitched every few seconds. Not from hunger, not from vocalization. A repetitive gesture, like reflex. Then came a sound. It wasn't a call or a grunt. It wasn't even strong. Just a brief, low intake of air, followed by a strange clicking against the lower teeth. Too soft to be threatening. Too short to be voluntary. Seifu turned his head toward the underbelly. The curve of the stomach still sagged into the dust. But between the belly and the ground, he now saw what Jalen had mentioned. A crease in the shadow that shifted in rhythm with something separate. He stepped back carefully, waved over his colleague Nima, who had followed with the first aid bag. They crouched together, one on either side, studying the slope of the elephant's torso. Seifu placed his hand gently on the outer rib, just firm enough to test for response. Nothing. Then, using a long wooden rod from the kit, he carefully lifted the edge of the stomach where it touched the ground. That's when they saw it. A small shape. Still curled, still damp. Tucked in the dust, shielded by the mother's weight. Not a wound. A calf. She had given birth, here, alone, on the side of the road without shelter or help, and then she had collapsed. The effort had drained her, and in falling she had shielded the newborn completely from sight. The calf was not dead, but its legs were folded awkwardly, pinned by the pressure of the mother's side. One eye blinked slowly. The trunk was too small to reach the air properly, barely shifting the dust as it moved. Nima whispered, "It's still breathing." Seifu nodded once, firmly. But not for long if she doesn't move. They now faced a new crisis. If the mother stayed down, the calf would suffocate from heat and pressure. If they attempted to pull the calf without her cooperation, they could injure both. And if the mother was too weak to rise, the calf wouldn't survive the hour. Seifu stepped away just long enough to call it in. Confirmed. Birth collapse. Mother untagged, undernourished, barely conscious. Calf trapped beneath. We need a medical team with hydration and lifting tarp. The reply was immediate. Understood. Mobilizing now. He returned and knelt by the mother's head again, watching her eyes for any shift. "You've done everything," he said softly. "Now we help." The mouth twitched again. This time a slow movement of the tongue followed, not directed at food or threat, but instinct. They poured a line of water into the dust near the trunk. No touch, just a scent, a signal. What happened next was almost imperceptible. A long, slow breath from the mother that filled her ribs slightly more than before. Her flank shifted outward, a soft drop of tension from muscle. The calf responded with the faintest kick against the earth, one leg twitching free by half an inch. The mother had not risen. But something in her had listened. Something in her was beginning to stir. The water soaked slowly into the ground near her trunk, darkening the dust in a shallow curve. The elephant's body had not shifted since the last exhale, but her ribs had begun to rise with slightly more rhythm. Slow, deliberate, almost uneven. Still not strong enough to move, but no longer fading. Sifu crouched again, eyes on the shape beneath the belly. The calf had uncurled just slightly, its hind legs twitching now, pressed close to its small chest, the skin still damp in patches along the flank. The slickness of birth hadn't dried fully, and small clumps of dirt clung to the folds behind the ears. The discovery had changed everything. This wasn't a lone injured male, she was a mother, and what had appeared to be collapse from heat alone was now clearly the aftermath of labor, likely unassisted, unprotected, and drawn out far longer than her body could tolerate. The rangers worked slowly. No sudden movement, no flash of equipment, just soft placement of tarps nearby and preparation of water canisters. The medical team was still 15 minutes away, but now every minute mattered in two directions. If the mother moved the wrong way, she could crush the calf's chest. If she didn't move at all, the calf would suffocate in its narrow pocket of space, slowly losing strength before it ever had a chance to stand. Nima adjusted her position closer to the calf's exposed leg. One back foot was pressed hard into the soil, slightly bent, toes curled inward. It kicked once, not out of panic, but instinct. Sifu's voice was calm. If the calf shifts too much, it could get lodged under her spine. Jalen stood further back now, observing from the outer ring. His hands stayed at his sides. No camera, no movement. Just watching. The mother's eye opened again. This time not halfway, not fluttering. Fully open, glazed but aware. Her trunk moved, barely, but it lifted an inch off the dust and dropped again. A grunt escaped her chest. Soft low. A warning or a call. It was impossible to tell. Nima leaned in and whispered, "She's trying." Then, slowly, her right front leg shifted forward in the dust. Not a rise, just a drag. The skin along her shoulder bunched and loosened, muscles contracting, the body trying to listen to instinct despite the weight of heat and loss. The calf moved again, this time with more purpose. The head pressed outward, lifting from the ground with strain. The ears were still folded tight, but the trunk reached sideways, seeking open space. A small squeaking exhale left its throat, the first audible sound. Sifu whispered again, "It's a girl." There was no celebration, just fact. A calf, barely breathing. A mother, nearly spent. And a countdown that hadn't stopped. The mother's chest lifted again, higher than before, and this time her entire flank rose half an inch from the dust. Not a stand, not a roll. But the pressure shifted just enough that air flowed into the space where the calf's lungs pressed. The calf reacted immediately. Legs kicked, neck twisted. The body wobbled but didn't fall back. She had space now. Narrow, but enough. Sifu motioned for the tarp to be placed near the calf's side, not to move her, but to catch her if she slipped. Nima steadied the front legs, just out of touch. Then the mother exhaled again. One long breath that shook through her shoulders. And for the first time she lifted her head off the earth. The air went quiet. No birds, no buzz of insects, just the sound of her trunk curling upward toward her own mouth. She was not standing, but she was no longer collapsing. Beneath her, the calf braced its front legs and lifted its own head fully off the ground. Small, shaking, alive. In the silence that followed, the only movement was wind. It moved through the low grass nearby, bending the tips and carrying the scent of damp soil into the distance. They stretched the first tarp from the front axle of the vehicle to a thin thorn tree nearby, anchoring it with quiet hands and careful rope. The shaded cast was narrow, barely enough to reach the mother's head. But it was a start. Nima moved slowly, dragging a second tarp closer, careful not to startle the calf now shifting beneath her. The sun had climbed higher, pressing down with a steady weight. The dust no longer drifted. It clung. Insects buzzed low to the ground, and even the breeze had fallen away. But still the rangers worked without pause. Every motion stayed slow. Every decision stayed gentle. Sifu carried the water container in both hands. He didn't pour it directly, only let it trickle, a thin ribbon of movement that darkened the soil inch by inch near her trunk. The water pooled in a shallow curve. catching the light before it disappeared beneath the dust. The mother didn't turn her head, but her breath grew longer. Not deeper, just steadier. The nostrils widened slightly on the next exhale. Not enough to show awareness, but enough to suggest her body was registering the change. Jalen watched from just beyond the ring of tarp shadow. His gaze stayed on the calf, who now had managed to extend her front legs fully. The hooves scraped at the ground without rhythm, each effort wobbling as muscles too new for purpose searched for balance. Her body still bore streaks of birth fluid, now mixed with soil and sweat. Her eyes blinked slowly, irregular and untrained. But they opened. Sifu whispered, "She sees light." They didn't touch her. The space between birth and first standing was too fragile. If interrupted, it could unravel, but they didn't need to intervene, only hold the moment open long enough. The mother's trunk lifted again. Not far, just a slow curl toward the pooled water, the tip dragging a thin line across the surface before falling back. It was the first deliberate movement since her collapse. Hope, in that heat, was a matter of degrees. The medical team's arrival was still minutes away, and nothing could be rushed. The calf could not yet stand, and the mother could not yet rise. But both had shifted. Both had moved. And with each breath, the stakes remained. If the mother failed to rise, she would not be able to feed. If the calf remained trapped or immobile, she would weaken past the point of recovery. No sedation, no restraint, only time and temperature stood between them and loss. Nima poured a fresh line of water several inches from the last, closer to the elephant's chin now. The soil hissed as it drank. The mother responded with the faintest twitch of her ears, a flutter against heat. The calf let out a low sound, not a trumpet, not a cry, just a breath that cracked open at the edges like a voice unused to air. She twisted her body once more, this time freeing her hip from the mother's belly. Her back legs unfolded behind her. For the first time, her body was fully outside the mother's shadow. The rangers stepped back a little. The calf pulled her front hooves underneath her, legs shaking so fiercely the joints nearly bent in reverse. Her muscles spasmed from the effort, but she didn't drop. She only paused. And then her chest lifted. Not fully upright, but enough to raise her weight onto her forelimbs. The posture of instinct. Sifu placed a hand near the tarp pole, steadying it as the wind picked up again. Soft, brief, just enough to ripple the canvas and carry the scent of wet earth through the air. The calf stayed upright for 3 full breaths, then dropped again, gently, folding into the dust. But it was enough. The mother's ears fanned open. Her trunk rose once more, and this time it reached forward, toward her daughter's side. Not far, just far enough to touch skin. In that heat, under that thin strip of shade, both bodies rested. Not lifeless, not collapsing, alive and aware of each other. The sun had dropped low enough to cast longer shadows across the stretch of dry land. Heat still clung to the dirt, but the sharpness had eased. The worst hours had passed. The calf had not stood again, but she hadn't folded inward either. Her head remained upright, supported on shaky limbs, her ears twitching at every nearby sound. Her breath, once shallow and sporadic, had taken on a slower rhythm. Her trunk moved in small circles along the ground, brushing at dust, exploring its edge. The mother remained still for most of that time, unmoving, head down, eyes half shut. But she had not stopped breathing, and her ears had not gone flat. Every few minutes she adjusted the position of her trunk, tracing invisible lines through the dirt as if trying to remember the shape of her own space. The rangers had pulled back further, giving the pair quiet distance. The medical team had arrived, but kept their presence light. No needles yet. No restraints. Nothing invasive unless critical. This wasn't a crisis to be handled. It was a moment to be waded through. Sifu remained at the edge of the tarp's reach, watching for signs. Nima had repositioned a water container slightly closer to the mother's trunk. They no longer needed to cool her. They needed her to rise. Movement came without warning. The mother's left front leg bent slowly, pulling inward. Not in pain, in preparation. Her ribs lifted. The shoulder dipped. Then the trunk curled tightly and pushed against the ground, adding leverage. Her back legs braced. She did not rush. She did not groan. She rose, first to her knees, then higher, until her front legs locked in place. The motion was unsteady, her weight trembling beneath her ribs. But her spine lifted. Her chest cleared the ground. Her back limbs followed slowly, each joint finding its place. The entire effort took nearly 40 seconds. Not a dramatic push, just deliberate movement from a body deciding not to fall again. When she stood fully, dust rolled down her flanks in sheets, loosened by the shift in posture. Her skin stretched tight over her frame, ribs still sharply visible, but she was upright. The calf stirred at once. Her head tilted upward. Her body tried to follow. Front legs pressed into the dirt, back legs shaking behind her. The newborn's knees buckled once, then straightened. Her front hooves sank into the soil, but she didn't collapse. The mother turned slowly, one step at a time, pivoting on her front feet until her gaze found the calf. Her trunk extended halfway. The calf shifted again. She made a second attempt, this time placing all 4 feet beneath her in one wobbly lurch. Her frame was fragile, ears still folded, legs too thin for balance, but she found it anyway. She stood, not tall, not strong, but enough. The mother stepped once, then twice, moving until her trunk could reach. She lowered it gently to the calf's back, brushing across the shoulder blades in a long, slow touch. The calf turned slightly, leaning in, her own trunk curling toward the contact. It wasn't a reunion. They had never been apart. It was recognition. A wind passed over the dry ridge behind them, carrying seed husks and warm air across the plain. Grass shifted in short waves. For the first time since the collapse, the mother looked beyond her calf. Her ears lifted fully, alert. Her nostrils flared once. No other elephants had come. No distant calls returned. But she had risen, and her calf had followed. Sefu stepped back further. No need for words. The others followed. The 2 remained in the center of the shaded patch for several more minutes, unmoving. Then the mother lifted her trunk once more, this time pressing it gently against the calf's chest. The calf stepped forward. One leg, then the other. Together they walked 2 full meters. The dust swirled faintly behind them, soft and slow. They did not walk quickly. The mother's steps were wide but unhurried, her shoulders dipping slightly with each stride, the effort still present in the tight draw of her flank. The calf followed closely, her legs unsteady but learning, a slow rhythm that found balance in her mother's shadow. Jalen stayed where he was. The tarp flapped softly behind him. The water containers had gone still, their work done. No one moved. There were no drones overhead, no ID tags scanned, no satellite collars affixed. The pair were undocumented. No names, no records, no known herd affiliations. They had come from somewhere beyond mapped territory, carried only by instinct and quiet endurance. The dust rose gently beneath their feet, disturbed only enough to mark a path that the wind would erase within minutes. The rangers didn't speak. Sefu watched the mother's gait with care, observing her weight distribution, noting the slight limp in her right rear leg. It was not serious, but it would slow her. She paused once, halfway across the flat, and turned her head toward the calf. The calf bumped against her leg. A soft gesture, not seeking attention but proximity. Her trunk curled loosely along her chest, still unsure how to use it fully. Her ears flicked back in small, delayed reaction to the distant insect calls. But she stayed upright. They continued. Each step away from the shaded space marked a shift in risk. Away from water. Away from medical oversight. But no one stopped them. There was nothing here to hold them. No pen, no facility, no truck waiting with straps. This wasn't that kind of rescue. The mother chose her direction without hesitation. Not toward the hills, where shelter would be quickest. Not toward the main road, where human activity might offer easier access to help. She chose the long line of scrub beyond the ridge, the brush that led to seasonal migration trails, still faint from the drought but embedded in the land's memory. Nima adjusted the knot on the tarp but didn't fold it yet. Her eyes followed the calf's movements, noting each time she stumbled slightly but corrected. The calf no longer needed help. She needed distance. Jalen rested one hand on the truck's hood. The metal had cooled beneath the stretch of evening. He didn't take a photo. He didn't write anything down. There were no names to record. The brush swallowed more of their shapes with every step. First the legs, then the bellies. Their backs moved in and out of view as they passed through the taller grass. The mother stopped once more before entering the thicker scrub. Her ears turned outward. She didn't trumpet. She didn't look back. But she lifted her trunk once into the wind, testing it. The calf stayed close, brushing her side. There was still no sign of another elephant. No call answered. But they did not hesitate. The brush line took them in fully a minute later. Only the ripple of disturbed grass remained, and that too settled quickly. The dust behind them drifted back toward the road, drawn by the soft breath of evening. Sefu stepped forward only to collect the tarp. He folded it slowly. The others did the same. No one spoke. Far off, a bird called from a tree not yet stripped by the dry season. The air smelled of warm earth and something, faintly sweet, a late bloom clinging to its stem. Jalen remained the last to move. His eyes stayed on the place where the mother and calf had disappeared, not because he expected them to return, but because that was where the story ended, the kind that left no tracks and no need to follow. The dust settled. The grass stood still. The light softened until it no longer cast a shadow.